McAllister, who's our next speaker. He's a professor and director of the graduate program in rhetoric, composition, and the teaching of English here in our English department. Ken is a specialist in new media analysis and development, and he has spoken and written extensively on topics ranging from the politics of computer virus writing to the panics of computer pedagogy, which I think many of us have experienced. With Judd Ruggill, he's co-curates the Learning Games Initiative Research Archive. We need an acronym for that. One of the largest publicly accessible video game archives in the world, right here at the University of Arizona in the College of Humanities. His books include Game Work, Language, Power, and Computer Game Culture. Another called Gaming Matters, Art, Science, Magic, and the Computer Game Medium, also co-authored with his co-director, Judd Ruggill. And the forthcoming book called Tempest, Geometries of Play, also co-authored with the same co-author. So please help me welcome Ken McAllister.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming out on a Thursday evening. I really appreciate it. I know there are a lot of new shows on television that could be pulling you away. So I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. I'm going to talk about some things probably that all of us have come into contact with, if not online, then in our daily lives, and that is memes. I'll focus a fair bit of time. In fact, I'll do an interactive sort of exchange with you about viral videos, and many of which have actually leaked out into non-digital kinds of culture, and I'll show you some examples of that. But I want to say just a tiny bit about myself and about sort of what brought me to this place, talking to you about memes. So as Mary said, I study computer culture. In particular, I study computer subcultures. I've studied hacking, phreaking, breaking, virus writing, as well as computer games. And I've done that for many years and have been involved in many of those communities over the years. So when I started to think about memes, in fact, when I was invited by the college to give a talk about memes, even though it was something that I had not immediately written about, it's certainly something that I've come into contact with for decades, in fact, like all of us here. And I have sort of watched them emerge in all these different media mediated forms, from the World Wide Web and so on, but also through things like television, and before that through things like literature and poetry, and even things like religion, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. The one thing that I think is probably most important as a context for what I'll talk with you about tonight is to know that I'm a rhetorician. And rhetoricians study, in brief, the art of persuasion. So the thing that really fascinates rhetoricians is how is it that we come to believe things? And how is it that we can make people believe things? There are all kinds of ways that that kind of process unfolds. And they can be very high-tech, and obviously they can be very low-tech. And again, I'll talk with you about some of those things. But in particular, tonight, I'm interested in how is it that memes, all these different kinds of memes that have transfused history, how is it that they have influenced us, shaped our beliefs, and shaped the cultures in which we exist, in which we thrive, in which we move back and forth. And so a lot of what I'll get at sort of toward the end, and in the latter part of the talk, will be about the persuasive elements of memes, both in their antique forms and in their more recent forms. Really, the purpose of the talk tonight, which is, as if you've seen the flyer, this great flyer, by the way, this is such a great flyer. I wasn't sure I wanted to do the talk until I saw the flyer. Man, I want to go to that talk. That sounds great. You got Charlie the Unicorn and Honey Badger, and you got Gangnam Style. I mean, what's not to love? My purpose, really, for tonight, though, is really to offer a kind of meditation a meditation on the idea of memes as memory. And I'll talk a little bit about what does meme mean in just a second, but I like this idea of the meme itself as memory. And I'll consider a few examples drawn from history, then make things a little more interactive, as I said, and I'll actually let you select a few of your favorite internet memes, which I'll put up here. I've sort of pre-selected 10 or 11 popular internet memes, and I'll ask you to select one or two, and we'll talk about them together. All right, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. All right, great. So, what is a meme? Let's start there. We all kind of probably know what a meme is, sort of. The term is pretty new. It's actually a term coined by Richard Dawkins of atheism's defenses fame, and he wrote in his book, The Selfish Gene, that a meme is a unit of human cultural transmission. A unit of human cultural transmission. And he was trying to come up with an idea about culture that matched sort of the evolutionary processes of the gene. So you got the gene at the biological level, and you've got the meme at the cultural level, or the human cultural level. So he went on to say the meme is a unit of information residing in the brain and is the mutating replicator in human cultural evolution. It is a pattern that can influence its surroundings. That is, it has causal agency and can propagate. So that's what Dawkins said. He didn't really dwell on it, though. He put that out there, and it raised a lot of questions, and certain people got kind of intrigued by it, but he didn't really pursue it. That really wasn't his project. And so, kind of ironically, Richard Dawkins coined the word meme, but doesn't really have a meme of his own. But that's all right. That's okay, because lots of other people came to the task and have pursued that work about what is a meme and how does it propagate. And indeed, there's now an entire field called memetics, which studies memes, and there are people who pursue these questions, philosophical and mathematical, even algorithmic. They pursue these issues about what is a meme and how do they work. For example, scholars like Burchett, Rolando, and Lotman have done all kinds of interesting work on memes and something they call memetic engineering. That is sort of the ways in which a meme can actually construct entire systems of thought. And this happens throughout history. It's not just this new form. There are all kinds of very sophisticated explanations and analyses of memes. Here are a couple that you're seeing here. This is you're just seeing the title here of Dalal and Mahajan Siegel's report, A Study of Meme Propagation, Statistics, Rates, Authorities, and Spread. And this is a very technical document. In fact, it really tries to look at how do memes propagate, not on the internet actually, but through newspapers, through everyday newspapers where one idea, one sort of intriguing idea appears in one maybe small town newspaper, and by the end of within 48 hours is being widely reported on in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And so they are actually able to use computer networking models to track that process. And this article is a very technical document around that. Similarly, there are folks who have looked at memes as a motive for activism. If you think about memes as a way of generating an incredible amount of energy around a particular idea, really mobilizing a lot of people very quickly across many kinds of borders, then the idea that you could use memes to catalyze activism is a promising one. And so there are scholars who have tried to figure out algorithms whereby you could use memes to generate interest in certain kinds of topics. And what you're seeing here in this formula, this idea, as it says here, is that if you can get 10% of a population to really, really believe in a new meme and a new idea, like being inoculated for influenza, get 10% who really believe in it, and then you can get another 30% who kind of believe in it. Like they've heard it, they're familiar with it, they kind of believe in it. If you can get that many people, that percentage, that group of people will be able to very likely generate very high levels of return on the impact of that meme throughout the entire population. So you get folks like, or you get scholarship like that. Interesting stuff. Today, memeticists have a fairly well accepted definition of meme that goes well beyond Dawkins, and you're looking at a pretty sophisticated one here, as you see, all the transmission, infection, coding, decoding, and all kinds of other things. Although this definition that's now pretty well established might not seem all that different at first, but give it a listen. A meme is a cognitive information structure able to replicate using human hosts and to influence their behavior to promote replication. I'll read that again just so you can track it. A meme is a cognitive information structure able to replicate using human hosts and to influence their behavior to promote replication. So if you kind of listen to the subtext and even the supertext of that definition, you can probably easily understand why a rhetorician like me, someone who's interested in influence and how we fashion belief in ourselves and in one another, you can understand why a definition like that would be incredibly intriguing. Put simply, memes are pieces of information which, through various processes, most of which we really don't understand all that well, despite the complexity of work like this. Memes are pieces of information which, through various processes, replicate within, spread through, and ultimately alter human communication patterns. That's incredible. That's an incredible thing that this tiny little kernel of something can replicate rapidly and change how we behave around one another. Now, you might imagine that, given the breadth of that definition, that pretty much all ideas are memes. That must be the case. Really any kind of communication that can be communicated would be a meme. There are properties, because there are properties of transmission and replicability, right? And you wouldn't exactly be wrong in that. But there are some subtleties to this that I think would steer us away from that. Let me give you an example. Let's say, if I were to say to you, for instance, Professor Carter's and Professor Melillo's talks yesterday were fantastic, if I were to say it, I'd certainly be transferring an idea to you. And if you weren't here yesterday, you might well leave here tonight believing and maybe even knowing, if you really trust me, you'd leave here knowing that Brian and John are crazy smart and talented. Right? So you've got propagation and even mutation. But pretty quickly, this idea is going to die an uninteresting death. Not because its content is false. John and Brian are incredibly smart and talented. But because there's really not that much energy in the replication. So when we use the term meme today, we are generally talking about ideas, phrases, concepts, and so on that spread far and wide. That is, they exceed their originary context, and they do it very quickly. And you can see some examples right here on this awesome poster. Let me give you a little bit of background then, having gotten us to a point where we, I think, are all on the same page about what a meme is, a little bit of history on memes. Most of us, when we think about memes, we probably think of them as pretty new. Dawkins comes up with the idea in the 70s, right? That's where we get the beginning of that, we get that term to describe that phenomenon. But they're actually quite old, and they have a lot to teach us, I think, about what it means to be human, which is obviously what we study in the humanities, a point I'll address in a minute or two. But let me give you some examples of memes that are drawn from history. So here's the satyr square. And if you look at this, you'll see that it's a pretty interesting thing. It's a multi-layered palimpsest. It reads backwards and forwards, up and down, all the way across. And the satyr square, the oldest instance of the satyr square that we've discovered was found in Pompeii, and dates to about 79 CE. However, by 200 CE, it's been found throughout Europe. It had made it all the way to Europe. And by 300 BC, we have instances of it in Syria and in other places in the Middle East. By the 1300s, it's well documented in Scandinavia. And by the 1980s, it's a commonplace in Terry Pratchett's novels, his various fantasy novels. And by 2011, there was a performance, a fully immersive, that is, building level performance piece in England that was largely built around the concept of the satyr square. How about this one, the three hares? Anyone know the three hares? Anyone seen that one? The earliest instance of this meme is 500 CE in Chinese Buddhist temples. After that, within a half a millennium, we find it again in Russian Islamic art. So the first time Chinese Buddhist caves, 500 years later in Islamic art, Russian Islamic art. A couple hundred years later, it's found all throughout Europe, France, Germany, Italy, and England, in cathedrals. And by the 1600s, in Europe, in Africa, and throughout the Middle East, the three hares are found in synagogues, only 200 years later. So here's an example of a meme that circulates not only geographically, but also theologically, or at least religiously, denominationally. Here's another one. Abracadabra. Our first findings of abracadabra appear in Egypt in the 100s. Simonicus writes about it in Liber Medicalis in the 200s. By the 1500s, again, it's in numerous treatises and fragments that we've found in Europe that treat magical spells and medical cures and things like that. By the 1700s, Increase Mather and the Puritans are railing against terms like abracadabra, and Increase Mather preaches a sermon about abracadabra. And then by the 1960s, DC Comics has a villain named Abracadabra, who uses a combination of magic. Actually, he uses technology in cultures where they don't understand the technology to make it seem like it's magic. And that's in the 1960s. But that's some early history, but there are plenty of other examples of memes prior to the web. Perhaps some of these will be a little more familiar to you. How about Kilroy was here? How many people know, how many people have actually seen a Kilroy was here logo? Yeah, about half of you. So Kilroy was here. We don't exactly know where this meme comes from, although there are a number of fun stories about it. One of them is that it came from Francis J. Kilroy, Jr., who was a ship inspector, was a service person, and he got sick in a hospital, and he was relieved from duty, and so there was a sign up, supposedly, there was a sign up that said, Kilroy will be back next week, and he was much depended on the base, and he indeed came back next week and put up a sign with a little face that said, Kilroy is here, or was here. That's one story. One fun thing about that story that makes me kind of like it is that medical situation all took place at Davis Monthan. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Another story is that somebody named J.J. Kilroy, a World War II ship inspector, used that sign to indicate parts of the subparts of ships that he had inspected, to indicate to people that he had been there and inspected the ship and all was good. So, but this really took off in part because it got put in one place and then it put it in another, and pretty soon it had moved all across the world. The illustration that you see here in these two actually has taken on a kind of life of his own. The figure is often known as Chad, and was actually added by the British, according to folklorists who have studied this. Chad in the British versions doesn't say Kilroy was here. Chad says what? No, and then there are lots of things that people complain about, in various times of crisis. So when there's an embargo of food, Chad might say what? No dinner, or things like that, and people just started writing these about all kinds of things. There's a glider, a World War II glider, where somebody has scrawled on the side of the glider, what? No engines? Right? So it propagates very quickly across all kinds of different countries and throughout all kinds of different contexts. In Australia, Kilroy is actually called Foo. In Chile, it's Sapo, and he goes by all kinds of other names: Smoey, Clem, Flywheel, Private, Snoops, Overby, and so on. But the mimetic sort of icon of this is pretty stable, and indeed you get even television shows like MASH giving an homage there. Not all memes are visual. The ones we've looked at so far are, but there's something called the Wilhelm scream. Anyone know what the Wilhelm scream is? Oh, of course, it's the guy running the camera. The Wilhelm scream, I would bet that every single one of you in the room has heard the Wilhelm scream multiple times. The Wilhelm scream is a kind of an in-joke, or we might say a subcultural meme that sound engineers and producers of sound embed into their movies often. The Wilhelm scream has occurred in more than 200 films. And I'm going to show you a few of those actually, since it was first shown in the 1950s. So, as you can see, lots of people like the Wilhelm scream, and it's become so popular, in fact, that now audio engineers and Foley artists have started to stop using it because so many people now get the in-joke. It used to be a way, basically, for sound producers to say hello to one another in film. So Quentin Tarantino and Lucas and Spielberg and a host of sort of smaller scale directors or producers, sound producers would put this in their films to say hello. Now everybody knows about it, so they're switching to other things, which those of us, perhaps only our cameraman, will know what those things are. Just a funny factoid about that. There was another sort of folkloric investigation into who made the Wilhelm scream, because for many years it was unknown who it was, and they finally tracked it down. They believed that it was Chev Woolley. Chev Woolley, purple people eater, one eye, one horn flying, purple people eater. He did contract work for that studio at the time, and purportedly that's Chev Woolley there. Here's another one. So there's another example. Now we've got memes appearing and being started, in fact, quite intentionally, if possible, in advertising. This wasn't the first, but it was arguably one of the most powerful early memes that we have in a kind of a new media age. So powerful was this one, in fact. Those of you who are old enough probably have used that phrase yourself in various department meetings and other horrifying contexts. But perhaps more dramatically, Walter Mondale said it of Gary Hart in the 1984 primary during a debate. And said about Gary Hart's policies, "Where's the beef?" in all his ideas. Perhaps something we might imagine would be said these days as well. And of course, that idea with that's Clara Peller, by the way. She made numerous appearances for various other products, including Prego spaghetti sauce, where she said, "Here's the beef." So you even get this kind of recursive phenomenon happening with the meme, where it's actually being played with by itself with the people who participated in that process. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm still fixed on the Scream. And there is a painting called The Scream.
Yeah, Edvard Munch.
Edvard Munch. And it's a psychodrama of a situation or a particular individual. And at one point it was just a painting in a museum.
Yeah.
And
that's a great example of a meme that propagates initially in a kind of an accidental way, but it becomes lucrative, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, that's a funny connection. And indeed, I would say that kind of connection, that associational connection that you just made, speaks volumes about the mechanics, if you will, the rhetorical mechanics of how memes work. So that's great, thanks. Okay, history lesson is over. What exactly do I mean by a meme's memory then? That was my original title, if you recall, a meme's memory. As I've been thinking about how memes work, old ones and new ones, I began considering their similarities. The first thing that occurred to me was that there's just the ease and the speed of propagation. We know now that memes, they propagate, in hours, if not minutes, across, vast distances. But if you think about it, even the Seder Square, starting in Pompeii and making its way throughout the rest of the globe in a matter of a few hundred years, if you consider the time and the context and the difficulty of travel, that was incredibly quick. It was very, very quick that meme was propagated. It went from Pompeii to Syria in just 150 years, and was put into regular use. The second thing I thought about was that they participate always in multiple economies, and I think this gets a little bit to your point. From the 3 hairs to binders full of women, right? You are following that particular meme. That's one that just emerged in the last 48 hours. Right? There's a website, bindersfullofwomen.com, already. If you get on Google, there are dozens of parodies of binders full of women from the last presidential debate already. So from the 3 hairs to binders full of women, not to mention these kinds of things, not to mention not impressed, right? This meme, not impressed. LOL cats, eye is on your table, stealing your hams. There are hundreds of these with cats as the protagonist, or maybe they're the antagonists. No Impact Man, which again is the reading for this year at the university, and has spawned not only multiple kinds of copycat projects of trying to have no impact on the environment, no negative impacts, but has also spawned dozens and dozens of parodies. You get something like that, or the Oracle of Bacon. If you all played with the Oracle of Bacon, I hope. It's 6 degrees of separation between any actor and Kevin Bacon. And so you can go to the oracleofbacon.com, I think it is, and you can put in Laurence Olivier, and then it will tell you, Laurence Olivier was in this movie with this person, and that person was in a movie with this person, and that person was in a movie with Kevin Bacon. And so, and actors, there are stories supposedly that actors actually take roles now in order to raise their Kevin Bacon index. So this, remember what I was talking about, this early definition of behaviors changing as a result of memes. So there are accidental ones because memes are having an impact on how people think, but then there are the intentional ones of people wanting to participate actively in the meme and in its propagation and in its transformation. So you have these, and they participate in these multiple economies. They all contribute to and benefit from systems of value: religious value, cultural value, community value, and of course, commercial value. And I think that's probably best expressed with at Art Munch's screen, where you have a painting that is now I'm sure a multi-million-dollar, maybe a multi-billion-dollar licensing or franchise property. It's an intellectual property now. It's a brand. Right? And then when it gets stolen, the people who wonder how these things happen and are they accidental certainly went wild. The internet went wild with the questions of, was it stolen in order to enhance the brand value of Art Munch's screen. So you have those. Third, memes are transmitters of information. That's probably not a stretch to think about either. They transmit information. Abracadabra transmits, if not actual magical power, then at least the anxiety or the expectation of the transmission of magical power. Similarly, Kilroy was here, transmits information about camaraderie. Oftentimes people will see, especially while they were in the service, seeing Kilroy was here was, for some anyway, viewed as comforting. I'm not alone. Kilroy was here. It's kind of a joke, but it does mean that a comrade was here. Kilroy was here. So it can certainly transmit information about camaraderie, but also, as we saw with the story about it being J.J. Kilroy, the shipbuilder, issues of surveillance and even omnipresence. Kilroy is here, even in the deepest below decks. Kilroy is there watching. Right? Then there's the idea that memes are endlessly repurposable. As you've seen, these memes have appeared on amulets and scrolls, carvings, glass art, comics, graffiti, television, inspirational posters, and of course their parodies, viral videos, and so on. Once the meme is set, it would seem, the context becomes the green screen against which the meme can perform. So the meme is there at the center, and you just change the background, and the meme takes on a kind of a new meaning. In other words, memes integrate exceptionally well into the cultures in which they're suddenly embedded. There's a question I have about that, which I haven't had time to think about, but maybe you do. Maybe you have some thoughts about it. And that is, do memes camouflage or shed their original meanings when that happens? If you can even say there's an original meaning for these things. When they change, when they cross some of these boundaries, do they shed that original meaning and take on a new one? Or does something else happen? Finally, and this is the point that I really want to dwell on in the last few minutes here before we get to our interactive exchange. There's this idea, and that is that memes are not only transmitters of information, but they're also repositories of information. Memes are repositories of information. And that's the idea that I want to leave with you tonight and have us pursue in a couple of case studies in a second, but I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. Memes remember, I want to say. Memes remember things because they contain all kinds of information that signals to receivers the existence of certain phenomena, events, practices, styles, and so forth. Those are embedded in the memes. You could say the purpose isn't to convey that, to transmit that information, but it's there. The meme itself becomes a repository of information. So let's look at an example of this. Consider the meme Leroy Jenkins, which some of my students brought to my attention. And anyone, I know there are a couple of undergrads here from my undergrad class. And raise your hand if you know Leroy Jenkins. All right. So I think the fact that a little more than half of the room knows what Leroy Jenkins is a sign that we probably are dealing with a meme. So here I'm going to show you the video. A little bit of background on this. Leroy Jenkins takes place in World of Warcraft, the online video game World of Warcraft. And what you're going to see is a group of people who have logged into the game, and they're planning a raid. They're planning on attacking a big set of monsters in the next room. And they're trying to make plans, like who's going to do what, because not just one person can do this. You need a whole team to affect this victory together. So that's what you're seeing. They're planning out what they're going to do. So there's Leroy Jenkins, and this video was introduced within a forum in a game community, and quickly pervaded the internet, and now it's fairly common, at least sort of among the geek class, to be, again, I've been in university meetings where some situation is being described and someone is described as a Leroy Jenkins, by which that means somebody who, even after all kinds of research, after careful planning and collaboration, just goes, Leroy Jenkins! Just runs in and messes everything up, and the whole plan is upended.
And a trading card game version as well.
Funny you should say that.
Oh, there you go.
So to show you how far this has come, these are World of Warcraft card games. Those of you who saw a presentation I gave at Playground with Judd last week, we brought a bunch of things in from the archive. These are a few more that we didn't show. These are all Leroy Jenkins cards and a figurine. The Leroy Jenkins figurine. So the meme from this video, this amateur video, somebody doing this dumb thing on a game, has now been instantiated, been built in to the card game. You can get these cards, and they're all kinds of different cards. Some of them are actually quite funny. On this one, it says one of Leroy Jenkins' secret magic cries is that affects certain kinds of changes in the game is that you say, "It's not my fault." Let's see, on this one and this one, another thing that you can say to get additional points, score additional points, is, "At least I have chicken." So, yeah, and then the figurine, of course, is just epic. So, just to sort of characterize the scope and range of a meme, it's not just the circulation of cute videos. It actually participates in these economies of figurines and game companies and so on. Switch over now. So about Leroy Jenkins, we could say a number of things, going back to this idea that memes are repositories of information. We could say that, among other things, this meme of Leroy Jenkins overtly remembers, for instance, a style of massive multiplayer online role-playing games. We could say that is a piece of information embedded in this meme. It also tells us that there are at least two particular styles of playing such games, very serious and very careless, each of which involves all sorts of sub-practices and tools. It tells us that there's a particular version of WoW, of World of Warcraft, that there's a particular game area in which things happen, things take place. In particular, this is Upper Blackrock Spire, in case you track such details. And then also that there are a set of machinimation tools, machine animation tools that allow you to capture video like this and replicate stories and tell stories online. Right? Those would be the more overt things that the meme remembers, but it also, I would say, remembers things, a number of latent details, or self-referential, or even meta-referential things. For instance, that there is a particular cultural practice, namely sharing funny videos online by creators and then by subsequent viewers, and then propagating them and changing them. That's a more latent thing here. That there's a pastime of gaming itself. That would be another piece of this meme. And there's a phenomenon of culture of computer gaming, especially that many people, or at least 8 people, are participating in here. And then there's the idea that contained here, I think, that the internal role of rhetoric, the art of persuasion, within the game world is very active. That the role of rhetoric is very active here, and we see that happening through the suasory role of statistics. You hear the leader asking about what's the probability of survival and things like that. There's a rhetoric of leadership, of collaboration, and so on. Again, these are latent pieces of information found in this repository, this memic repository. So a meme as a memory device is different from, say, a flash drive or even a story, because a meme is more than just data. The code, for instance, that assembles pixels on a Facebook page to show the world your three-legged cat stealing an Archway lemon cookie, that would be a piece of data stored that one could propagate. And a meme certainly contains less information than a full-blown narrative, a story, a novel, a play, or poem. Instead, a meme remembers because it offers an easy entry point, I would say, into an otherwise very complex piece of content. Rhetorically, then, memes help audiences tap into an emotional reservoir, often including humor, nostalgia, cuteness, annoyance, and other immediate or other immediate visceral understandings that we derive from the things that we're looking at, the memes that we're looking at. And these things animate their, consequently, an additional set of layerings of memory. Let me say that again. Rhetorically, memes help audiences tap into an emotional reservoir that then animates their own additional layerings of meanings and associations. Right? So you see it, you tap into something, it taps into something emotionally with you, and then from there it follows a kind of a network of associations for you and congeals into a whole system of meanings for you. Memes, then, I think it's fair to say, are catalysts in this way. Memes remember and are catalysts. They're starter yeasts for your bread, or perhaps, given the hour, maybe I should say starter yeasts for your homebrew. Ultimately, in other words, because memes remember, they help us remember, and they do so in at least these two senses. They recall things for us. I remember that weird commercial. You might think about the Wendy's commercial. So they help us recall things when we see them. But they also reconnect us to things. They remember. They remember us. The meme is a piece or a core of something, if you will, of a larger memorial set of processes. The core, then, can ever be remembered in an infinite number of ways. You can think, then, of a meme as Mr. Potato Head, or maybe better, Legos. The core is the same, but the combinations are infinite. Finally, as memes spread, they not only remember the local contexts, but they also remember all the cultures they touch. And by crossing boundaries of all kinds, they have one additional, and I would say amazing power, and that is that they can connect us to one another across immense spans of time and space and difference. Think of abracadabra or Gangnam Style. Okay, so that's the story of the meme that I want to leave you with. And now I would like for you to look at at least one meme. We've got 6 or 7 minutes left before we have to shut down. But I'll show you a few of these things. Somebody shout out, or maybe we can get a show of hands about what meme you'd like to talk about. And here's what I'd like us to do. We'll look at the meme. I'll show it. We'll watch it, and then I would be interested to hear what you all think are the overt or the manifest and the covert or the latent memories or pieces of information that are embedded in that meme. Memes that probably we've seen many times and kind of blow by as we laugh a little and we forward it to somebody. Right? All right, so this will take just a second. Here are the memes. Anyone? We got Charlie the Unicorn, Honey Badger, History of Dance, Rick Rolling. Has anyone ever been Rick Roll?
Yeah.
Head on. Head on, fly directly to the forehead. Head on, fly directly to the forehead. The Downfall parodies. Some of you have probably seen the Downfall parodies. An early meme, the Dancing Baby. which has been repurposed thousands of times now. The Cinnamon Challenge, that's a more recent one. Has anyone actually done the Cinnamon Challenge? Come on, raise your hand, don't be shy, don't be humiliated. The Cinnamon Challenge is a challenge where you are challenged to eat a spoonful of cinnamon, which, if you don't know the chemical properties of cinnamon, will make you think, oh, I could do that. I love cinnamon. Not a good plan. All your base are belong to us. Classic video game meme, and then of course Gangnam Style. How can we not at least invoke Gangnam Style? Right? Any preferences?
Gangnam Style?
Gangnam Style? Anyone else? Yeah, Gangnam Style? All right, we've got at least 2 people saying Gangnam Style. All right, let me call this up. Shouldn't take too long here.
You don't have a place on the web where we can access that list, do you?
I don't, but if you give me your email, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Oh, great.
You ever put a bird on it?
Yep, put a bird on it. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to holler out your favorite memes too. While we're waiting. Let's see.
Double rainbow.
Gangnam Style is still coming up. What was it?
Double rainbow.
Double Rainbow, another good one. What are some other ones? It's going to take a second for Gangnam Style to come up here.
History of dance.
The History of Dance. Yeah. How many people have seen History of Dance? That's a very fun one, and been again parodied many times. So you just see the kind of openings of some of these things.
And of course, llamas with hats.
Llamas with hats. Yeah.
Horrible.
All right, here's Gangnam Style. Let me zoom in on this. Man, I feel like I should end with that somehow. So just for a couple of minutes, what pieces of information, if we accept the premise that a meme is a repository of information, not just a transmitter, certainly is that, but a repository, what's there? What's being stored and remembered in that meme?
East meets West?
East meets West? Absolutely.
Well, I think it's the dance, which now, from now on, every time you're at a wedding and you see somebody break into that dance, you'll remember all of that video. So
Absolutely.
I understand that memory. In the Cabbage Patch or the Kid Play, and all of those dance moves.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that sort of taking place or unfolding when Psy appeared as a guest on Ellen, on The View. He was making all these surprise appearances, sort of doing the dance.
And on Saturday Night Live, they were doing a parody of him, and then he
comes out. There are now dozens and dozens of parody video, or not parody, maybe even homage videos. There was a youth detention center where the inmates had decided that they were going to do a version of Gangnam Style. So there's a video online of these detained youth doing the entire version of Gangnam Style. Yeah, hi.
It's also interesting to look at the industry, how the way in which Korean youth culture now become a global popular culture.
Yeah, exactly.
After the Asian financial crisis in 1997, the Korean government established the Ministry of Cultural Industries, deliberately promoting high-speed internet, and also, as we know, Korean electronic companies try to find means of products made by many other companies around the world. And it's a whole sort of globalization.
Yeah,
globalization.
Yeah, it's not only entertainment; it's a way to sell.
Yes.
Absolutely. John.
I think there's something sort of mysterious or unknowable about it that allows us to separate the form from the meaning. I mean, we don't know what this video was originally about, right? So we're able then, people are able to look at it and say, we can see this in a different way than it was originally intended to be seen, and therefore we can reappropriate it and reuse it and have it take on a different meaning, right?
Yeah, that's a great observation from a linguist, right? I mean, that when we don't understand the language, then we're even freer to impose certain understandings and interpretations onto it, or to completely eradicate the original meanings and do something completely different with it. You can get online, and I would recommend this, you can get online and see a translation, and there are other sort of latent pieces of information that are there in the Korean that are very interesting. This is actually a social commentary on a particular area of Seoul. But I would say that when I read the translation, it really changed my understanding of the video, and in a way it became less funny, even though it's clearly surreal. Just to go back to Hairen's point, though, about the industries, his pants, I don't know if you noticed his weird shorts. They're this pretty niche fashion, and when this video started to go viral, they became incredible sellers. Did I see another? Hannah will take maybe one more comment. Yeah.
Well, I just want to go off that a little bit about what you're saying about that kind of subculture of the video, because it's talking about what would be equivalent to like a Beverly Hills or like some type of American concept, you know, in Korea, but it's really morbid in concept that you can make fun of your own culture and still participate in it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would say that's part of the constant irony of memes, too, that you can both denigrate and appreciate simultaneously.
One of the parodies is, like, I can't remember the name of it, it's like Bokyo, but it's another neighborhood of Seoul, but it's supposed to be like slightly more, well, definitely poorer, but slightly more, the Seoul equivalent of like trash. That's the right term.
Yeah, and again, there's a Gangnam Style that was done by a Korean woman rapper, and she does it from it's basically a feminist reinterpretation of Gangnam Style. So again, this meme is propagating, but a lot of the power of the meme as it propagates is the information that is sort of retained within it, arguably not part of the originary content, not part of the major content, but this sort of subtext that's in it. We're out of time. I really appreciate you coming out. Thank you so much for your